The Evans household was a flurry of activity as Derek Evans, a tall man with a weathered face, rifled through drawers in search of his camping gear. The kids, Bobby and Elsa, bounced around the living room, chattering excitedly about their upcoming trip. The atmosphere was electric with their enthusiasm, but Laura Evans barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, carefully orchestrating the perfect weekend. "Honey, have you seen my flashlight?" Derek called out from the hallway, his voice tinged with mild frustration. "It's in the garage, next to the tent," Laura replied, not looking up from the phone she held in her hand. A small smile tugged at her lips as she quickly typed a message to her lover. "Tonight, they're leaving soon." Derek walked into the kitchen, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You sure you don't want to come with us? The kids will miss you." Laura turned to face him, feigning a pained expression. "I really wish I could, but this headache, I just need some rest. Besides, you guys will have a great time without me." Derek studied her for a moment, concern etched on his face. "You've been having these headaches a lot lately. Maybe you should see a doctor." She waved him off, forcing a light laugh. "It's nothing really. Probably just stress. Go on and have fun. I'll be here when you get back." Derek sighed, pulling her into a gentle hug. "All right, but promise me you'll take it easy. And call me if you need anything." "I will," Laura murmured against his chest, her eyes flickering towards the clock on the wall. The sooner he left, the sooner her real plans could begin. The kids burst into the room, tugging on their father's arm. "Come on, Dad. We're ready to go." Okay, Derek chuckled, ruffling their hair. He turned back to Laura, giving her a lingering kiss on the forehead. "We'll be back before you know it." Laura watched them from the window as they piled into the car. Bobby waved energetically, while Elsa blew her a kiss. Laura waved back, her smile warm and motherly. But as soon as the car disappeared down the street, her demeanor changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. "They're gone," she said as soon as the line connected. "Come over." The voice on the other end was deep and smooth. "On my way, sweetie." Laura hung up, feeling a surge of adrenaline. She walked through the house, making sure everything was in order, checking the clock again. The house, which had moments ago been filled with the sounds of family life, now felt eerily quiet. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Laura's heart raced as she opened the door to reveal Roland, a tall, muscular man with an easy grin. He stepped inside, his eyes raking over her with undisguised desire. "You miss me?" Roland asked, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her close. "More than you can imagine," Laura whispered, pressing herself against him. The tension of the past few weeks melted away as she felt the warmth of his body against hers. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, Roland's crushing against hers, Laura melted into his embrace, her mind spinning with a rush of adrenaline. She pulled him towards the stairs, never breaking the kiss. They reached the bedroom in a tangle of limbs, the door slamming behind them. Clothes were tossed aside carelessly, landing in heaps on the floor. Laura pushed Roland onto the bed, straddling him with a hunger she hadn't felt in years. Roland responded in kind, his hands gripping her hips as she moved against him. The hours slipped away unnoticed. The house filled with the sounds of their passion, heavy breathing, whispered words, the occasional crash as they knocked over a lamp or picture frame. Laura's mind was consumed by the moment. Every thought of Derek and the kids banished to the farthest corners of her consciousness. They paused only briefly, catching their breath, before diving back into each other with renewed fervor. Roland was everything Derek wasn't. Wild, unpredictable, a man who lived on the edge. Laura craved that excitement, the danger of what they were doing, the thrill of being with someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. As evening crept in, the golden light of the setting sun cast long shadows across the room. They lay entwined on the bed, catching their breath, the sweat cooling on their skin. Laura traced her fingers along Roland's chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. "Why didn't you leave him sooner?" Roland asked, his voice low. Laura hesitated, the question catching her off guard. It's complicated, she replied, her tone softer now. We have those monsters' kids a life together, but it's not enough. Does he know? Roland propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. No, Laura said, shaking her head. That loser has no idea. He trusts me. Roland smirked, a hint of something dark in his eyes. That's his mistake. Laura didn't respond, instead pulling him back down into a kiss, trying to drown out the nagging voice in the back of her mind that told her this was all going to end badly. But for now, she didn't care. For now, she was exactly where she wanted to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they pulled themselves out of bed. Laura slipped on a robe, tying it loosely around her waist as she moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Roland came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. You really should think about leaving them, you know, Roland murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Laura leaned back into him, closing her eyes. I know, but not yet. I need time. Just don't take too long, Roland replied, turning her around to face him. I don't like sharing. Laura smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You won't have to, she promised, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. They returned to bed, the earlier urgency replaced with a more subdued intimacy. But even as they lay together, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. She pushed it aside, telling herself that she could handle it. She had everything under control. But deep down, she knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. The campsite was quiet. It's on their cousin's place. The crackling of the fire and the soft sounds of the lake, the only noises breaking the stillness. Derek sat by the fire, staring into the flames. The kids, exhausted from the day's activities, were fast asleep in the tent, but Derek couldn't relax. There was a gnawing unease in his gut, something that had been there since they arrived, and it was growing stronger as the night deepened. He glanced at the tent where Bobby and Elsa lay, their soft breathing barely audible. They were safe, and yet something felt wrong. Derek tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just the stress of the past few weeks catching up with him. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Standing up, Derek walked a short distance from the camp, hoping the cool night air would clear his head. He stared at the moonlit lake, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Laura. She had seemed fine when they left, but now he couldn't help but worry. Maybe I should check on her, Derek muttered, the words escaping before he realized he had spoken them aloud. His decision was made almost without thinking. He walked back to the camp, peeking inside the tent one last time to make sure the kids were still sleeping soundly with their cousins. Then, grabbing his keys, he slipped quietly into the car, trying not to disturb them. The drive home was tense. The winding road, bathed in eerie moonlight, seemed to stretch on forever. Derek's mind raced, replaying moments from earlier in the day. Laura's insistence that he take the kids on the trip, her headache. It all seemed normal at the time, but now it gnawed at him. When he finally pulled into the driveway, something immediately felt off. The house was dark, no lights on anywhere. But the front door, normally locked by this hour, was slightly ajar. Derek's heart pounded in his chest as he approached, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He pushed the door open cautiously, stepping inside. The house was still, the silence oppressive. Derek's instincts kicked in, and his hand went to the small of his back where he kept his gun holstered. His fingers brushed the handle, reassuring him that it was there. Moving through the house, Derek's senses were on high alert. The kitchen was empty, the living room untouched. But as he climbed the stairs, he heard faint sounds coming from the bedroom. Muffled voices, soft laughter. The dread in his gut turned into something colder, sharper. Derek's breath hitched as he reached the top of the stairs. The bedroom door was slightly open, and the sounds were clearer now. His heart pounded in his ears as he pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges loud in the quiet house. The scene that met his eyes made the world tilt. Laura, his wife, was on top of a man grinding, a man who wasn't him. The reality of it hit him like a physical blow, knocking the wind from his lungs. The shock froze him in place, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. They didn't notice him at first, too caught up in each other. But as Derek stood there, the shock quickly gave way to a cold, seething fury. His hand tightened around the gun at his back, his knuckles white as he fought to keep his breathing steady. "This is it," Derek whispered to himself, the words barely audible but heavy with finality. He didn't give them a chance to react. His voice, low and filled with a deadly calm, cut through the room like a knife. "Laura, what the fuck?" The sound of her name, spoken with such venom, was like a bucket of ice water. Laura's head snapped around, her eyes wide with horror as she realized who was standing in the doorway. Roland froze beneath her, the color draining from his face. "Derek, why are you here now?" Laura began, but the words died on her lips as she saw the gun in his hand. "Shut up," Derek said, his voice trembling with the effort to stay calm. He took a step into the room, his eyes never leaving them. "Get off him!" Laura scrambled off Roland, her hands trembling as she backed away, her mind racing. Roland sat up, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Let's just talk, man," Roland said, his voice shaky. "We can work this out. This is just for fun." Derek ignored him, his focus solely on Laura. "Was this the plan all along? To send me away so you could do this in our bed?" Laura's lips quivered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Derek, please. It's not what you think." "Not what I think." Derek let out a bitter laugh, his grip on the gun tightening. "It's exactly what I think." Roland moved slightly, as if to get up, but Derek swung the gun toward him. "Don't move," Derek snarled. "You think you could just walk away from this?" Roland held his hands up higher, panic setting in. "Man, I don't want any trouble." "You found it," Derek said, his voice cold. "You both did." He took another step forward, and Roland flinched, fear overtaking him. Laura was crying now, her sobs filling the room, but Derek felt nothing but a deep, consuming rage. Everything he had worked for, everything he had trusted was shattered. There was no turning back. The decision was made in a heartbeat, and as he raised the gun, the weight of betrayal pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. This was the end. There was no other way. Derek stepped fully into the room, his gun steady in his hand. His voice was low, deadly calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "You both are finished." Laura's eyes went wide with terror when she saw the gun aimed directly at them. Roland, equally frozen in place, felt all the blood drain from his face. "Derek, no. Think about our beautiful kids." Laura stammered, her voice trembling. But it was too late. Derek's eyes were fixed on her, cold and hard, devoid of any warmth or the love that once lived there. "I trusted you," he said quietly, each word laced with controlled fury. Roland tried to raise his hands in a gesture of surrender, his voice shaky. "Please, man, let's talk about this. We can figure something out." But Derek's bitter laugh cut him off, a chilling, humorless sound that made the hair on the back of Laura's neck stand up. "Talk? There's nothing to talk about," Derek replied, his tone turning icy. His finger tightened on the trigger, and before anyone could react, he pulled it. The shot was deafening in the confined space, the sound echoing off the walls. Roland's scream followed almost immediately as he crumpled back onto the bed, his hands instinctively reaching down to where his manhood had been just seconds before. Blood soaked the sheets beneath him, pooling faster than either Laura or Roland could comprehend. Laura's scream pierced the air as she backed away, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. Her eyes flickered between Roland, writhing in agony on the bed, and Derek, who stood still, the gun now pointed at her. The cold finality in Derek's gaze told her everything she needed to know. There was no reasoning with him now. "I loved you, Laura," Derek said, his voice strangely calm in the face of the chaos. "But you've killed that love." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she shook her head, pleading with him. "Derek, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We can fix this." But her words fell on deaf ears. Derek took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Laura's survival instinct kicked in, and she bolted for the door, hoping to escape, hoping to find some way out of this nightmare. But Derek was quicker. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the hair and yanking her back into the room. Laura screamed, trying to claw at his hand, but his grip was ironclad. He threw her to the floor, and she scrambled backward, trying to put as much distance between them as possible. You wanted satisfaction. Derek spat, his voice filled with venom. You got it. Laura was crying hysterically now, her pleas becoming incoherent. But Derek had already made up his mind. He raised the gun, pointing it at her head. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Laura's sobs, the sound of Roland's pained groans, the weight of the gun in Derek's hand. Goodbye, Laura, Derek said, his voice a mere whisper now. The second gunshot rang out, shattering the quiet that had fallen over the room. Laura's world went dark in an instant, her body slumping to the floor as the life drained out of her. The room fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of Roland, who was now too weak to scream. Derek stood there, staring at the scene before him, his wife's lifeless body on the floor, her lover bleeding out on the bed. He felt a strange numbness wash over him, as if he were detached from his own actions, from the horror he had just unleashed. For a moment, Derek just stood there, the gun hanging loosely at his side, his heart racing as he absorbed the carnage around him. Blood was smeared across the bed, splattered on the walls, and pooling on the floor. The bodies of Laura and Roland lay motionless, a stark reminder of the brutal reality he had created. Derek's mind was a whirlwind of panic and cold determination. He had to leave. There was no time to linger. He took a deep breath and began to methodically clean up. First, he grabbed a handful of towels from the bathroom and began wiping down every surface he had touched. The walls, the door handles, the drawer pulls. Everything was meticulously scrubbed to remove any trace of his presence. His movements were swift and practiced, driven by a sense of urgency. Next, Derek stripped off his blood-stained clothes, tossing them into a large trash bag. He pulled on a fresh set of clothes, simple jeans and a shirt, careful to make sure he looked ordinary. He then gathered up a few essential items, including a flashlight, a first aid kit, and some cash he had stashed away. Each item was packed with deliberate speed. He moved to the closet and grabbed a duffel bag. Quickly, he stuffed it with clothes and other necessities, not caring much about organization. The bag was heavy but manageable. Derek glanced around the room one last time, ensuring he had not missed any detail. The sight of the bodies, the mess. He forced himself to look away, focusing instead on completing his escape. He carefully opened the front door, peeking out into the quiet street. The neighborhood was still, with no sign of life. He slipped out, locked the door behind him, and headed to his car. He loaded the duffel bag into the trunk and took one last look at the house. Then, he got in and started the engine, driving away with a heavy heart. The drive back to the campsite was a blur. Derek's mind raced as he formulated a plan, trying to suppress the memories of what had happened. He focused on the immediate goal, getting his kids and leaving for his parents' farm. Arriving at the campsite, Derek parked the car and approached the tent quietly. The soft breathing of his children through the tent fabric was a small comfort in the midst of the chaos. He unzipped the tent, careful not to wake them too abruptly. "Bobby, Elsa," Derek whispered gently as he shook them awake. "We're leaving early. Get dressed quickly. We need to go." Bobby stirred first, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, what's going on? Why are we leaving so early?" Derek forced a reassuring smile. "There's been a change of plans. We need to get to the farm before it gets too late. It'll be a bit of an adventure." Elsa, half awake, yawned and stretched. "Okay, Dad." Derek helped them out of the tent, quickly but calmly. He handed them their coats and urged them to get into the car. Bobby and Elsa were too tired to ask many questions, merely nodding and doing as they were told. Derek packed up the tent and other camping gear in a rush, tossing everything into the back of the car with minimal organization. Once the car was packed and the kids were settled in their seats, Derek started the engine. The early morning sky was just beginning to lighten, casting a faint glow over the landscape. Derek focused on the road, steering away from the campsite and toward the highway. The drive was long and filled with tense silence. Derek kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Bobby and Elsa's faces as they dozed off again. He knew he had to be careful, to make every move count. They couldn't afford any mistakes. At a gas station halfway to the farm, Derek stopped to refuel and grab some snacks. He kept his interactions brief, paying in cash and avoiding eye contact with anyone. His mind was preoccupied with the plan, calculating every possible detail to ensure their safety. Back on the road, Derek drove with determination, focusing on reaching the farm. The countryside was still a few hours away, but it was a place he felt would offer some semblance of safety and a chance to start over. His parents' farm was remote, tucked away from the hustle of city life, and he hoped it would provide a temporary refuge from the chaos he had left behind. As the sun began to set, Derek finally saw the familiar sight of the farm in the distance. Relief washed over him, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. He had to keep the kids calm, keep them believing that everything was okay, and start a new chapter in a life that had been irrevocably changed. He pulled into the driveway, the old farmhouse looming in the twilight. Derek took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He would need to explain things to his parents and make sure the kids settled in. But for now, he was just focused on getting through the night. "Okay, kids," Derek said, trying to sound upbeat. "We're here. Let's get settled in and have a nice dinner. I'll tell you more about our adventure later." Bobby and Elsa perked up at the mention of dinner, their earlier apprehension momentarily forgotten. They climbed out of the car and stretched, the prospect of being in a new place bringing a sense of curiosity. Derek watched them with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The escape was only the beginning of their new life, and he knew there would be many challenges ahead. But for now, he had a brief moment of peace as he led his children into the farmhouse, hoping that this would be a safe haven for them all. Derek's parents' farm was a stark contrast to the chaos of his recent life. It was an old, sprawling property, surrounded by fields and woods, with a large farmhouse at its center. As Derek pulled up the driveway, he took a moment to steady himself, trying to push the weight of the past few days into the back of his mind. He needed to focus on the present, on providing some sense of normalcy for his children. His mother, Martha, was the first to see them. She had been working in the garden when Derek's car came into view. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked towards him with a concerned look. "Derek," Martha called out as she approached. Her eyes widened when she saw the kids in the back seat. "Bobby, Elsa. Oh my God, it's been so long." Derek forced a smile as he got out of the car and opened the door for his children. "Hey, Mom, we're here." His father, John, emerged from the barn, his expression shifting from surprise to a warm, welcoming smile. "Derek, I didn't expect you this early. Everything okay? Where is Laura?" Derek took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need to talk. Can we come inside?" John nodded, his smile faltering slightly as he sensed the gravity of Derek's tone. "Of course. Let's get you settled." The family moved inside the farmhouse, Derek's parents guiding them through the kitchen. The scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, a comforting aroma that momentarily eased the tension. Martha led them to the living room, where Derek sat down with Bobby and Elsa. "Are you hungry? I can make something quick," she offered. Derek shook his head. "Yeah, Mom, but first I just need to talk to you two about something." Martha and John exchanged worried glances before sitting down opposite Derek. "What's going on?" Martha asked gently. Derek's gaze was distant as he tried to find the right words. "Something happened back home. It's over now. We're safe here." John leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "What do you mean, it's over? Did something happen to Laura?" Derek hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, there were complications. It's a long story, but the important thing is we're safe now." Martha's eyes filled with sympathy. "Derek, you know you can tell us anything. We're here for you." Derek's voice was hollow as he replied. "I know, Mom. It's just we had to leave quickly. I'm trying to start over for the kids' sake." The conversation was painful, but necessary. Derek's parents accepted the situation with quiet understanding, though the details remained vague. They helped the children settle into their new rooms, setting up toys and familiar items to make the transition easier. As the days passed, Derek began to find a rhythm in the farm life. The work was hard but honest, a welcome distraction from the turmoil he had left behind. He woke early each morning to tend to the animals and the fields, his hands becoming callous from the labor. Bobby and Elsa adapted quickly to their new surroundings. Everyone lied to them about their mom. They played outside, running through the fields and helping their grandparents with small chores. Their laughter was a balm to Derek's troubled mind, a reminder of what he was fighting to protect. Derek's parents were patient and supportive, but the conversations were often filled with unspoken words. Derek's father would occasionally offer him advice on farm work, while Martha would cook meals and offer comforting words. They avoided probing questions, understanding that Derek needed time and space to heal. Despite the routine, Derek found it difficult to escape the shadows of his past. The weight of his actions loomed over him, a constant reminder of what he had done. The farm offered physical labor to distract him, but the emotional burden was not so easily lifted. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Derek sat on the porch with his parents. Bobby and Elsa were playing a game of tag in the distance. Derek's father broke the silence, his voice gentle. "Derek, I know things have been tough, but you're doing a good job here. The kids are happy, and that's what matters." Derek nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Thanks, Dad. I just want them to have a normal life. They don't need to know what happened." Martha joined the conversation, her voice soft. "We'll help you as much as we can. We're family, and we'll get through this together." Derek offered a faint smile, grateful for their support. "I appreciate it. I'm just trying to keep moving forward." As the weeks turned into months, the story of the double murder in the Evans household faded from the headlines. The police had no leads, no suspects, and Derek's trail was cold. The media's focus shifted elsewhere, leaving Derek and his children in relative peace. Derek continued to work on the farm, finding solace in the routine and the sense of purpose it provided. He knew the past would never fully leave him, but for now, he focused on the present. The farm became a sanctuary, a place where he could rebuild and protect his family from the shadows of their former life. Bobby and Elsa flourished in their new environment, their laughter and play a constant reminder of what Derek was fighting for. Each day brought new challenges, but also new moments of hope and connection. Derek had found a new beginning, one where he could strive to create a better future for his children. The farm was a place of healing and renewal, and though the weight of his past remained, Derek embraced the chance to build a new life, one step at a time. Months had passed since Derek and his children had settled into the rhythms of farm life. The early mornings filled with the sounds of livestock, the days spent tending to the fields, and the evenings spent around the dinner table had become their new normal. The horrors of the past seemed like a distant memory, tucked away in a part of Derek's mind that he rarely visited. For the first time since everything had happened, Derek felt a sense of peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the fields, Derek was in the barn, finishing up his chores. The cool air of twilight was beginning to settle, and the faint chirping of crickets started to fill the quiet. He was lost in the routine of checking on the animals when his cell phone rang. But who is this? He had changed the numbers. Derek glanced at the screen, noting the unfamiliar number. Curiosity piqued. He wiped his hands on his jeans and answered the call. "Hello," he said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end before a voice spoke, one Derek had hoped never to hear again. "Derek, it's Roland." Derek's heart skipped a beat. His grip on the phone tightened as he tried to process the voice. "This isn't possible. You're dead." The voice on the other end chuckled darkly, sending a shiver down Derek's spine. "Not quite. You didn't finish the job. But now, we are coming for you." The line went dead. Derek stood there, stunned, the phone slipping from his grasp and hitting the floor with a thud. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the threat. Roland was supposed to be dead. He had seen the aftermath, the finality of what he had done. But now, the chilling realization set in. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Derek's hands were shaking as he picked up the phone and ended the call. He took a deep breath and tried to steady himself. He glanced around the barn, his eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to stretch and move with every flicker of light. He quickly headed back to the house, his mind working overtime. The threat was real, and he needed to act fast. As he walked through the front door, he found Bobby and Elsa in the living room, playing a board game. Their laughter, so innocent and carefree, was a stark contrast to the fear gnawing at Derek's insides. "Hey kids," Derek said, forcing a calm tone. "How about we have an early dinner tonight? I think we should all get some rest." Bobby looked up from the game. "Is something wrong, Dad?" Derek forced a smile. "Just a little tired. Let's eat and then get to bed early. I'll make us something special." As Derek prepared dinner, his mind was a whirlwind. He needed to protect his children and himself from whatever threat Roland might pose. He had to find a way to ensure their safety without alarming them. He had no idea how Roland had survived or what his next move would be. Dinner was a quiet affair. Derek made an effort to engage the kids, asking about their day and discussing their plans for the next day. Bobby and Elsa chatted animatedly about their school and friends, oblivious to the tension in their father's demeanor. After dinner, Derek tucked the kids into bed, kissing them goodnight and reminding them to sleep well. He lingered in their rooms longer than usual, his mind racing as he planned his next steps. When he finally closed their bedroom doors, he made his way downstairs, his resolve hardening. Derek moved with purpose, checking all the locks on the doors and windows. He set up an alarm system he had purchased earlier but never had the chance to install. As he worked, his thoughts kept returning to Roland's threat. The idea of Roland coming for him was terrifying, but Derek knew he couldn't let fear control him. He had to be prepared. Just as Derek finished setting up the alarm system, he heard a noise outside, a rustling sound that seemed out of place in the otherwise silent night. He grabbed a flashlight and a gun he kept for emergencies and stepped outside cautiously. The yard was bathed in moonlight, and the shadows seemed to dance across the fields. Derek scanned the area, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He checked the perimeter of the house, his heart pounding with each step. He found nothing out of the ordinary. The rustling could have been an animal, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He returned to the house, double-checking the locks and ensuring the alarm system was activated. He felt a flicker of paranoia, but knew he had to remain vigilant. Derek spent the rest of the night on edge, unable to shake the feeling of impending danger. He moved through the house quietly, checking on the kids and making sure everything was secure. The threat of Roland was a shadow he couldn't escape, and he knew that he had to be ready for whatever came next. As dawn approached, Derek prepared himself mentally for the days ahead. He was determined to protect his family at all costs, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The peace he had found on the farm was now overshadowed by the looming threat, but he resolved to face it head-on, knowing that his children's safety depended on his strength and resolve.